All right, Centrelink and mental health. Let's have a ramble. And I do say ramble because I worked yesterday, so I'm pretty out of it, and it's hard to focus. And I will try my best. Um, but yeah, no, I'm struggling today. Uh, so yeah, 5 years ago I quit the Centrelink system because they were just really bad for my mental health. Like I really needed the help. I couldn't do any work at the time. But yeah, things they did, the screw ups and misunderstandings and, lack of empathy, they were just making my mental health worse. So I ended up quitting the system and I was like, I'm not coming back. But of course, the pandemic hit, and, the pandemic now seems normal, but you gotta remember, couple years back with the first lockdowns, everyone's like, what is this, like, never been through it before, don't know how things are going to turn out. And the government also reduced the requirements for Centrelink. So hey, the sensible thing was to go back and apply, especially because that was before they announced JobKeeper. So yeah, that's how I ended up back on Centrelink. And there are some reasons that I stayed on it, which I won't go into because otherwise I'll just go in circles. But yeah, so JobKeeper eventually ended, and then since then I've had Centrelink topping up my because like I don't make enough money working 1 day a week. I'm trying to work 1 day a week. Sometimes I have to take an extra week off because I just can't. Yeah, I've been struggling a lot, and I'm so tired. I don't have as bad of a headache today compared to some weeks when I'm doing a lot of detailed close up work and my eyes get really funny, but my body is really sore and I'm really tired. So yeah, some weeks I just can't do it. Like I'll be fine on the day that I work, and when I come home from work. But then after I've slept and my body has like done whatever you do when you sleep, then all the pain comes up and I wake up the next day super groggy and I just can't function. Anyway, I'm meant to be talking about Centrelink and not work, although I guess they're connected. But yeah, so 5 years ago they were really bad for me, and now I'm sort of going through a thing where I'm like, oh my god, I don't know what to do. It's been a little bit better this time, partly because, a lot of requirements were lifted for quite a long time during the pandemic, especially while we were still having lockdowns. And yeah, previously I had an employment assessment that put me down as being able to work like 20 something hours a week, which I haven't been able to do. Like maybe I've occasionally like just scraped it if I've been working at Hallow Scream at Luna Park. Maybe that like once or twice since that assessment. I don't actually remember how it works out. Probably that's the only time I would have done it. But it's not something I can sustain, and I can't even get close most of the time. But through some of the pandemic, I had that work from home finance job for a while. And so when you have, in Australia, when you have a capacity assessment between 15 and I think 30 hours per week, you're actually only required to work 15 hours a week, and then you're classified as meeting all your requirements, and job agencies won't harass you and all that kind of stuff. So while I was doing the finance work, there were times that I was making that kind of consistently, that job plus my bonsai job. But I think, like, when I look at it, one of the reasons that I was able to sustain that is because then there'd be another lockdown, and, I'd lose shifts, but there'd be exemptions from everyone working anyway, so there was less pressure to keep working so much, and, less obligations just in general, socially, and whatever. So I think, like, I was able to build up to that 15 hours a week, and then take breaks because the rest of society was taking a break. Um, and so I was able to do it then, but then when we had our last ever lockdown and we all came out, and that's when I started to get really depressed again and had to drop the finance work because it was just making me feel so awful. Um, Especially the nature of the work. Oh, like, the finance job didn't do this to my body, but my brain was melting out my ears and I was getting really badly depressed. So for most of this year, I've had a medical exemption, so I can just, manage myself how much work I can do at bonsai. My boss is really open and, understanding, and then I've got my GP keeping tabs on me, and yeah, been seeing this psychologist. but I do have to keep getting medical certificates every 3 months. So, I back in May, I put in a thing asking for, it was actually a complaint, complaining about a whole bunch of stuff, but also asking for a new employment assessment. And they still haven't looked at that. It's October, it's been 5 months, and no one has looked at it. But I had a few other issues that I had to actually call up about, because the system wasn't accepting, like, I have to report how much money I'm making every week or every fortnight, and it wasn't working when they switched the system to a new system, because of course it didn't. So I had to call them and sort that out. And at the same time, I was like, hey, so I've been asking for this employment assessment to be redone because it hasn't been redone in 5 years and I haven't heard anything back. And he was like, oh, okay, it's been more than 2 years, so yeah, I probably should have another one. I'm surprised they didn't give me one at the start of the pandemic, but whatever. I guess everything was really busy at the time. Anyway, it's about time I had a review. So I eventually got that set up. And that guy told me that someone would ring me to talk about when I would have the assessment, but instead I just got a text message saying, hey, this is when your employment assessment is on, and no details about what evidence I need to give them of my conditions. So, you know, great things about mental health in there is not giving me certainty or consistency, having wrong information constantly. And, you know, back when I was reaching that 15 hours a week thing, they were supposed to leave me alone, but they often didn't, and the job agency was still trying to call me in, and so they told me to go to Centrelink to get the exemption formalized because I'm working enough hours, and then Centrelink was like, no, you've got to talk to the job agency, and then the job agency was like, no, you've got to talk to Centrelink, and then Centrelink was like, no, you've got to... So, like, there's this constant back and forth. And, like, if I've got a mental illness and I go through a whole lot of anxiety every time I interact with Centrelink and the job agencies, sending me on this wild goose chase, this futile effort to get things processed, like, how do they think that is any good for treating mental ill people? It's just, yeah. And then, yeah, so organizing the ESAt, the Employment Services Assessment, it wasn't as bad as that. Like, that stuff happened last year, so it's still pretty fresh in terms of me thinking, oh my god, I hate dealing with this incompetent bureaucracy. So, yeah, minor detail is just one extra thing that I'm like, oh my god, nothing is working out. Anyway, at least it got organized, and then I had to Google myself and find there's a form to verify my medical conditions, which is different to the official medical certificate, so my doctor signed that. And then it said there was a thing saying psychologist report, so I asked my psychologist, she wrote me a letter, which was interesting to read, I've got to say. But, I had to find all this myself. Centrelink didn't tell me what I need to find to prove that I am struggling. And you'd think if someone has a mental illness and they're struggling with life, maybe it's a bad idea to not tell them what they need for a thing. Like, there's just no logic here. If someone's struggling to deal with life and you just make it harder by not telling them what they need to do. And this has been my consistent experience with Centrelink, is no one knows anything and no one tells you the things that you need. Anyway, so today was the call. Thank God it was a call and I didn't have to go out anywhere because I'm still in my pajamas. It's 1 o'clock, a bit after 1 o'clock as I'm filming because I just can't. This morning, and she's a registered nurse, not a psychologist, interviewing me about this stuff, but at least she sort of understood, yes, I am actually struggling. But it turns out that she can't give me an assessment, like a capacity assessment of less than 15 hours a week. Like, if I had an assessment below that, then I wouldn't have to go to these job agencies and I'd be meeting my mutual obligation requirements by just having a call with them once a quarter. That's what the legislation or the Social Security I've got a link to it somewhere says. But she reckoned she couldn't give me an assessment of less than 15 hours a week. Which was pretty upsetting because I'm not asking to be put on disability. I'm doing everything I can to keep my job, which is the whole point of these services, is to keep you in employment or find you a job. I already have a job, so I'm trying to keep it and not get worse and end up in hospital and having to, not be able to do that anymore. I'm working, I'm, as much as I can work, even if it's not much, I'm doing it. I'm seeing a psychologist. I'm in regular appointments with my GP. Like, I'm doing the things that I need to do to try and get better, even though it feels futile. But you can't give me less than 15 hours a week, and so I'm still signed up with a job agency, which, last time when I saw, I've had a few exemptions, and then eventually I had to see the Disability Employment Services people. That was back when I had a 20-something hour a week requirement. And when I talked to her, the lady at the service, she was sympathetic, but she was still going to have me coming physically into their office twice a week or something to do job search, back when I was still in no state to be able to do any kind of job. I can do job search from home. I have a computer, I have the internet. I don't need to physically go somewhere and do that. So, that was the support they were going to give me. Are you kidding? So that's my previous experience. And then the rest of my experience is the job agency arguing with Centrelink over who's responsible to give me exemptions when I was meeting my work requirements, and other screw-ups like that. And I've also had job agencies call me while I've had medical exemptions when they're not supposed to harass me, telling me I have appointments when I actually don't have to attend them, all that kind of shit. So I have never had a good experience with a job agency, including the Disability Employment Services groups. So when this lady is telling me that she has to keep me signed up with some people anyway, I did not have a good morning. I have suicidal thoughts, and yeah. So, but I looked up a few things and went back to bed. But actually, sorry, I'm getting myself confused. Other things this lady who did my assessment said is, she said my previous job agency was no good. I don't know which one she means, because there's been more than one that I've been signed up with. And so I don't actually know the name that she gave me. I didn't recognize it. So I'm with some other group, and she reckons she's put me on a higher level of support, and she said something about, they do counseling and health stuff, and I can't find any evidence of such programs, really. So I'm going to assume that's bullshit until I find out otherwise. She's extended my exemption to January, which is only a month longer than my medical certificate said anyway, so yay, thanks. And then this job agency apparently is going to contact me. But the other thing she said is if I, to get assessed below 15 hours a week, my only option is to apply for disability support. And Centrelink are constantly suggesting that I apply for disability pension. And it doesn't make sense to me. I know a lot of people are on disability pension for mental illness, but for one thing, I know it's really hard to get onto, and there's a lot of paperwork, and there's a lot of stress. And if you consider if I've got mental illness that makes me suicidal, especially when I'm dealing with all this ridiculous bureaucracy, the last thing that is going to be helpful for me is doing a whole bunch of paperwork. Even worse if I get knocked back and then feel like I've done all the paperwork for nothing. This is what you're offering to mentally ill people. That's really dumb. I need more help than that. I can't even bring myself to go through that whole process, contemplating it. Because the other thing is I just don't think I would fit it. And the reason for that, yes, I'm doing terribly and I'm not functioning well in life, but you need to have 20 points of impairment to qualify for disability. And the mental health criteria, when I look through it, I could maybe just scrape into half the points in the level that's listed as 20 points. Like, just because of the way that it's written, it's very one size fits all. And what I've read previously is that if you have like one thing that fits into a lower category, I think the next level down is 10 points of impairment. So if I have like some aspect of me that fits into 10 points, they'll put me in that rather than 20. There's even like one thing that I would fit into the 30 points of impairment level, because, you know, I live at home with my parents and I'm not capable of living on my own. That fits into the 30 points level, but I have things that fit into the 10 points level, and so it doesn't matter the rest of the things. What I've heard is that I'll just be lumped into the 10 points, and so I won't qualify. So what's the point of applying? You know, and I am working. I mean, people on the disability pension can work, but you know, the fact that I'm already doing it, I think, works against me as well. She also wanted me to get, you know, documentation from my last psychiatrist, who I told her I haven't seen in 5 years, and he's not up to date with my current stuff. I haven't seen him since, like, you know, I only got diagnosed with schizoid at the start of this year. He hasn't seen me since then. He doesn't know what's going on. And it was very different 5 years ago when I was just going through really, really bad depression. So, yeah. But the actual requirement, when I looked it up, it says the diagnosis needs to be made by a medical practitioner, which includes a psychiatrist. But if it's not made by a psychiatrist, you can include evidence from a clinical psychologist, which I have. So, you know, like, these people telling me things, they don't know what they're talking about. She admitted she doesn't know much about disability pension, which is great, you know. So once again, I'm having to work out the stuff myself. But yeah, so I just, you know, like, because my brother is disabled, like, properly, fully disabled. You take one look at him or he opens his mouth, you can tell straight away this is not a kid who's ever going to be able to do work. He qualifies for disability pension. I look at me and I'm like, there's no way. You've got to be kidding. What a joke. If they would accept me, it just feels... I mean, maybe I'm in denial about how bad I am. That's possible as well, but I just don't see it happening. So it's frustrating that, like, either I supposedly can do 15 hours of work a week, or I have to apply for disability pension. Like, there's no in-between for my specific situation and my particular mental illness presentation, which is different to other people. You know, like, maybe I haven't been in hospital yet, but I am not functioning in life. And also, something that none of these people ever consider is if that I ever considered trying to take myself out, basically. I'm the sort of person who would only do it if I could be sure that I was going to be successful. I'm not doing attempts. That's not me. So they're not going to have a chance to see me in hospital because, you know, I mean, I haven't worked it out yet, so no one panic, but that's just how I think, is like, if I don't think I'm going to be successful, I'm not going to try. So yeah, waiting for me to end up in hospital, which is what they seem to be doing, not a good idea. Yeah, anyway, blah, blah, blah. I've got a few notes I've been writing for my psychologist as well. The other thing is, even if I got on the disability pension, because I'm under 35, I think they can still harass me with things. So I've got less than a year until I'm 35, but, you know, I don't need to go through that whole process and then have them poke at me for a few more months before I finally escape all that shit. Also, to qualify for disability pension, you need to be fully diagnosed, treated, and stabilized. And some of the things that I've been talking about with my psychologist makes me think that I'm not fully diagnosed. There might be, like, at least one extra thing that I should be labeled with. Fully treated, well, I'm still going through psychology. I'm still holding out hope that I can get better, even though the evidence suggests otherwise. My doctor, my GP, also wants me to consider TMS, transcranial magnetic stimulation, which I have reasons to be nervous about. So I'm not doing that yet, but if Centrelink knows that's been recommended to me, then I won't be considered fully treated until I've tried it. And then fully stabilized. Well, look, I still hope that I'll get better than this. And if there's a chance of improvement, I'm not fully stabilized. Fully stabilized means that your condition's not going to change. So I just don't see myself that way. Yeah, so, after that call, I was feeling pretty down, suicidal, wanting to quit Centrelink again, except that I have expenses to pay. Particularly once my mental health plan runs out, I'm going to have to self-fund my psychology sessions until things tick over next year, and then I can apply for another 10 or whatever. Probably won't get 20 next year because they'll probably discontinue that. But yeah, so I kind of need the Centrelink to pay for psychology and a few other things. So I can't really quit them. And then I just went to bed and had a nap. But in that time, I was able to sort of calm down a bit and just think about a few things. And so, if I get to January and I'm still just not coping with the idea of going to a job agency and whatever uselessness they try and shove on me, if I'm not coping, I can just go back to my GP, get a new medical certificate, and hopefully Centrelink will just accept that and leave me alone for another 3 months. So that's a possibility. But what I've also been thinking is like, the lady did say my previous disability employment people were no good, and she's put me on a higher package of support. I don't know what that means, but and I can't even remember if I already talked about it in this video, to be honest. But so basically she's saying that she's sending me to someone better who offers services that will hopefully be better. Previously at the job agency, twice a week. Yeah, I did mention this, didn't I? Coming in twice a week for in-person job search, that is not supporting me. That's just wasting my time. But if these guys, she mentioned counseling and health stuff. I don't know what that means. If they actually do have something that can help me, maybe it's worth trying and just see if they've changed in 5 years and if things have gotten better. So I'm considering maybe I will just go in January, suss it out, and if it's not something I can cope with, then I'll get the medical certificate. Or, I don't know, I still don't think applying for disability pension makes sense. Yeah, it's a shame she didn't go into specifics and I didn't recognize the name of the agency, but hey. The other thing is, earlier this year there was a review of DES providers, and the worst was shut down and a bunch of others were told to step up. So hopefully whoever I'm sent to will be better. So maybe I just need to give them a chance. I need to talk to my psychologist, I think, next week, just to sort of figure out what I really think. And, this all happened today, so I haven't had a lot of time to process, what's happened and what I'm going to do about it. I just, interactions with Centrelink and job agencies in the past just make me more stressed and set back my progress in terms of getting my head together. So I'm not optimistic. Yeah. The other thing is I looked up the star ratings that a lot of these services have, and they had an Excel sheet, and so I was able to filter by my location and the ones that claim to specialize in mental health, and none of them have a higher rating than 3 out of 5. So that doesn't give me hope either. So I don't really know what's going to happen. I'm stressed. I'm trying not to be stressed, compartmentalizing the part of me that is stressed about Centrelink and trying not to go there. Trying to just push it off into some corner of my mind, which I seem okay at doing. I haven't had as much practice these days, I guess, but I'm trying to get back into that because, I know I shouldn't be compartmentalizing pieces of my brain, but, I can't cope otherwise because the world's shit. So, yeah, if that's what I need to do to just get through stuff, I'm trying to do it. Because, that's the whole point, right? In defense mechanisms, sure, it means my psychology is maybe not healthy, but if that's what I have to do to get through stuff, then what else am I supposed to do? So yeah, that's what's happening with Centrelink is, getting my hopes up that maybe they'd leave me alone, and then finding them telling me that they can't do it, they have to assess me as 15 hours a week when I'm struggling to keep half that going. Yeah, it's disappointing and it's stressful, and I'm not sure what I'm gonna do. Um, yeah, because I can't, to qualify to make that 15 hours a week, I'd have to work twice a week at bonsai, and I'm so my muscles are so sore, and some of the basic life things hurt today, and I'm tired and out of it, and yeah, I just can't see myself doing it twice a week, and it's going to take a lot to be able to get to that, if I can ever get to that. Especially without antidepressants, because I think antidepressants did help apart from screwing me up physically. So, uh, I don't know how I'm going to cope with stuff. And so I guess I will wait and see how things are going in January. But so far, to me, the evidence suggests that Centrelink isn't much better at dealing with mental illness. And it's frustrating because, like, all the politicians make a big fuss about, mental health support, whatever. But they don't look at some of the more fundamental stuff, like, financial security is a big part of mental health for people. Whether or not you have mental illness, like, financial security is a big part of mental health. During the pandemic, yes, everyone was locked up, but there were actually less suicides, I think. And the only way to explain that is because everyone was getting good financial support in those early lockdown days. People who previously couldn't support themselves and were constantly stressed about, just putting food on the table, they were actually able to afford it. And so, of course, they didn't feel as suicidal, even though we were all locked down and all the psychological stuff that goes with that. The financial stuff actually helped a lot of people, and politicians just ignore that. They're keeping up this punitive Centrelink system that just assumes everyone's a dole bludger. That's not a good way to treat people, and not a good way to keep people's mental health good. You can't just say, oh, we're opening a new mental health clinic or whatever. We're funding Lifeline, who are really just, they've never been good for me. I can hear them. I can hear the script that they're talking to me. Maybe people who haven't had a lot of that, are helped by it, but the illusion of being listened to does nothing for me. Yeah, the politicians will announce, oh, we're giving extra funding to Lifeline, but they're missing some of the basic stuff, which is people having financial security and not feeling like they're being treated like trash, like people who are trying to game the system. Yeah. Meanwhile, they give all this money to these job agencies who mostly just make people's lives miserable, instead of actually properly helping and doing their jobs. And it's like, who's the real dole bludger here? These big, agencies who get so much money from the government for doing very little for people. Yeah, it just doesn't make sense. So, anyway, I'm tired. My hair is all crazy, probably because I've been sweating, and yeah, it's funny how it stands up sometimes. Anyway, so live stream tomorrow. Already got some questions coming in on that form. I'm gonna go, and I suppose I should get changed and eat something and maybe take Hope for a walk and just get some air. Has the rain stopped? I don't even know. I've just been in this room feeling like garbage. Because, yeah, the Centrelink system sort of treats you like garbage. Anyway, gloomy stuff. But I'm still trying to think, like, I want to get better, and I'm trying everything that I can, and whether or not they see that, I'll figure something out.